Thank you very much. Is this on? Yes, I can myself coming back. It's great to be here because I remember before I joined the Commission I was one of these naughty persons called consultants making project proposals and managing projects with local authorities. And at that time I had contacts with the mayor of Gorizia, we're talking about 92, 93, trying to develop a project with Gorizia and nuove Gorizia. And we were looking at water. I hope that the problem has been solved, drinking water problems and all that. Unfortunately, we didn't get materialized the projects, but the idea was there, and therefore first put Gorizia on my radar screen. And therefore it's great to be here today. I took the opportunity to do a little detour, making a mistake going to Borgo, so which I saw now as well, which I took immediately advantage of to do some touristic things as well. So I'm very happy therefore to be here. I want to tell you something about the instrument of pre-accession assistance. I don't know, which button do we need to push to get my on? Good. The instrument of pre-accession assistance. Oh yes, great technology, I love that. Version 2. I think it's on already, that's the one. Version 2, they put it in Roman figures. I would have preferred that they would have put 2.0. It sounds like software and it is upgradable. But unfortunately, once we make up our minds, it's very hard to have it changed. So it's IPA 2 in Roman figures. If I just click here, we go further. I'm going to bore you a little bit by the architecture. I have half an hour, but when I went through all the papers very quickly what you've done, you got me more enthusiastic to talk about that work which you're doing. So I will try to make some time available for that as well, to present some possible linkages with the things which we are doing now, with civil society organizations, and what we could do in the future. But I'm here to do a job, and the job is to explain to you a very rough, give you a crash course about the instrument of pre-accession version 2. So you saw this nice pyramid of the architecture. What is important behind that is that we try to harmonize our approach in external aid. As you may know, we are ruled by a financial regulation, which goes for the whole budget of the European Union. Everything we spend is based on that, followed by implementing rules, and then we have also common implementing rules for all the things related to external aid. Coming to that, we also have our own IPA regulation, which has been revamped, and also its implementing rules attached to that. Anyway, IPA regulation, we of course building up what we've seen before. And one of the things we've seen before is that the countries who come to the Western Balkans and Turkey, and also still a little bit on our radar screen, Iceland, but in particular the Western Balkans and Turkey have some issues when it comes to rule of law. It's nice to see here when you talk about the blueprint that you say, hey, you hit the nail right on its head, that legislation alone, well-written laws are not sufficient. And we have to make sure that besides that these organizations, these authorities, take on board all these laws, it's also being implemented. And the only way to have that implemented is to make sure it lives among the citizens, that is in their heart, that they take it abreast and they say, this is indeed what we want for our society. So, we set on IPA 1, we continue with IPA 2 on IPA 1, but we have to focus a bit more on these reforms, on the rule of law. So everything which you see there, I'm not going to really debate because you can see it later on as well in the slides when you get them. The idea behind this common implementing rules, which I mentioned previously, is that we have one approach for all. It's important if you link your activities with, in the future, the European neighbourhood policy. Well, it doesn't perhaps go directly for you because Moldova is the nearest, and that's still far away. But for other countries in the instrument of pre-accession world, it is, notably Turkey, it is essential. I'm focusing here in particular on my specific background, civil society. Within DG Enlargement, we have a civil society facility, by which we try to make sure that these rules and regulations are getting into the hearts and souls of the citizens. And the instrument of pre-accession assistance part 2 makes it even more important. Previously we felt a little bit outside. Civil society will be concerned with whatever the government feels like it. Now we say it's very important. We look in particular at vulnerable groups, minorities. All the documents I received focus on that. To me, that's essential. Again, I'm not going to read out the text that you give later because I want to keep some time to discuss with you and to share my views. You saw cross-border cooperation. You are experienced in working on the cross-border cooperation. We have tried to redefine the strand. We're now making our strategy for the next phases, and in that cross-border cooperation we try to provide new ways and new approaches. I'll come back to that later. It's a separate strand, particularly now in the Institute of Pre-Accession Assistance, with its own particular annexes. I go further. Like I said, we have to make sure that the programs which are being drafted by the countries and forwarded to us to be negotiated with us as the European Commission do reflect the needs of the society. So we made it now very explicit in the Instrument of Pre-Accession Regulation that the role of civil society is to be involved, engaged, consulted. And it's something quite revolutionary if you think of it, that these countries 10 years ago, civil society was just culture and sports clubs. And governments just decided for all. And now we have to create an atmosphere by which the governments start more listening. So we have to give credit to some politicians. It will take time, like it has taken us quite some time. But let's put it forward in our regulation. You know here local authorities. We have to make sure, we always work with national authorities, which is logical because they are the masters of the rules which they have to take on board in order to join the European Union. But local authorities have an important role in implementing, an important role in monitoring. And it doesn't make sense if you have a nice national law, but locally it can't be implemented. I've always said, also with the countries from Central and Eastern Europe at the time, on the FARA, you should not just simply cut and paste a legislation of a given country, let's say Germany. You should make sure that the legislation also addresses the needs in your society. Okay, this I skip. And I think what's more important for you is what we are. Well, you all know the beneficiaries of the Instrument of Pre-Accession. You still see Iceland is there. We have not cut down the ties. We have still in contact. But let's say that we are on a reflection period in our relationship. And perhaps later on we'll come to a marriage anyway. But at the moment it doesn't look that way. You see enlargement agenda. Of course, we are DG Enlargement. It's an instrument for pre-accession assistance. It's not an instrument to build only bridges, roads and all that. We have to make sure that the countries will adhere to the criteria which we set forward in Copenhagen. And to make sure that they take on board, implement the legislations which are necessary. That they become part of the whole spirit of the European Union. So therefore, for us that's essential when we program support with the countries. But we also understand that this cannot be done without taking into account the limitations these countries have and to work on that. And one of the things which is important for us in that is, it's mentioned before, creating jobs, creating employment. We have the same challenge in the EU, and that's also a challenge for the Western Balkans. If you do not have a society, if you do not see that youngsters see that indeed their future is in Europe, that it offers opportunities, we will create another generation of non-voters for the European Parliament elections, of non-interest in the EU, and just falling away with the myths which are totally untrue. At the last European elections, I hope you have the same feeling that I have, I was constantly reading and listening and seeing politicians, what they said about Europe, and I lost some nails for that because I put them into my chair because they were constantly telling lies. Why? God knows. I think they're ignorant. That's my personal opinion. They don't really know what it is about. And as a result, they can't really explain it. And as a result, the citizens don't know. And they think that indeed we waste our time making legislation on the length of cucumbers without knowing it's not us who wants it, but it's the business. But okay. And then even the Prime Minister saying, let's rules from Brussels while his country's businesses want these rules. Okay, let's keep the myth, the dream. But we have to make sure that all the people there feel related. We have Croatia joining the EU. The referendum, 41% participated. The story told there was, again, totally not true, totally based on mal-knowledge of the situation. And now you've been up to 28%. It's very hard for us in DG Enlargement to defend the member states that we need to get these countries on board if just the new kid on the block already turned its back against it. Anyway, specific objective number one, I cannot re-emphasize it's more than enough, political reforms. We need to prepare the structures, the institutions for that. And if I talk about political reforms, I talk about reforms with the citizens. It doesn't make sense to give a country a democracy and say, here's the law, now you have a democracy, and it goes down the drain because people don't understand how to deal with it. You need to prepare the people about the law. And it starts at local level. It starts with school councils, where parents can find their involvement. If we do not start from there, they will never get accustomed to democracy, and then the bad political leaders, which are very good ones, will play with these people. If I see in Bosnia the nationalist agenda, and if you then ask the citizens what the real problem is, for them it's only one thing: the economy, jobs. But these politicians don't have a solution for that. So what do? They say they choose a nationalistic agenda. And the people swallow it. How is it possible? Every time when I deal with anti-corruption fighters, they say, you support crooks, you support criminals in our countries. I said, yeah, but I didn't elect them. It's just citizens, so we have to work for that. All this listing you may get later on, it's a summing up of the regulation. So, next to political reforms, as I said, economic, social, and territorial development. Making sure that these countries can get some economic growth. Because why would they join if that is not a prospect for them? For me personally important is the last one, because I deal with that chapter in DG Enlargement. Without innovation, without investment in technology, these countries, as the EU in the whole, will constantly lag behind. Which will mean we will never win any competitive battle. We can't win competitive battle based on labor market costs, because and overall the cost of production on labor is very low compared to the total price of the product, the share of labor cost. But more importantly, because we have to win the battle on innovation, be new. And face it, we are doing currently very bad in that. And I think about my children, I don't want them to push buttons in the manufacturing industry. I want to make sure they can use their brain. Well, unfortunately, a lot of the Western Balkan countries rather invest in bricks than in brains, and that needs to change. Here you see the policy areas which we address specifically in the Article 3 of the IPA regulation. I leave that for you to have a nice look at after. And then when you go into the annex of the regulation, you see also these priorities. I highlighted the one related to civil society. Again, you can get the text of this. I don't want to take too much of your time on that. This is probably more important. There's a specific annex of IPA regulation dedicated to cross-border cooperation, which says which are the main fields we have to work on with the countries. We've seen a lot of cross-border cooperation projects where I get the vibes back that since it's the EU delegation involved, since the government is involved, organizations feel that they don't really stand a fair chance. We try to change that. One of the things we're thinking of, which is made available under the new financial regulation, is low-value grants. we can award up to 60,000 without needing a lot of paperwork, which will help a lot. Okay, let's face it, a story just one region further from here about maladministration of EU funds is not contributing to the willingness of my financial controllers to waive all kinds of reporting obligations. Again, if one messes up, everybody suffers from it. So we really hope that starting with this, we can get it and make it successful, and that all players do what they have to do, so that later on we will not be taken back by our financial controllers, that they again go to in the control mode. We want to go into the responsibility mode. Okay. For some, this is the most interesting. How much money is available? Well, there's a lot of money available. But the interesting thing is always, look at the regional funds for Italy. They don't use it always. Regularly, just recently, I had a contract which I had to do not to do the final payment, but instead to do a recovery order, which meant that over 90,000 euro was not spent out of a 400,000 contract. Which is a pity, because this 90,000 euro would have greatly helped one civil society organization who said, we have a very good executive director, but we don't have funds to pay him anymore. If you would have 15,000, it would have saved us. So let's make sure that if we program so realistically, and hopefully if we projects, that we program it so realistically that all the money will be spent. Because otherwise it's lost. And that money lost goes to the general budget of the EU. So the EU member states are very pleased. They're quite upset that they now have to pay extra money to the EU budget because we have to fulfill our commitments which we done with contracts. Well, they decided that we could contract that amount, so they should also accept that we have to pay that amount. They probably had hoped that a lot of money would not be spent. So it proves that we're doing a bit better than foreseen. This is also interesting because this table shows you where the money should go. And you can always twist it around and make something enter in a certain specific area, but trust us, we will heavily, closely monitor that. You get the slides later on probably. You can't read this, but it's for information. I have people who assist me preparing slides, and that's important. Yes, we'll give it to them. This is for the cross-border cooperation. As you know, the cross-border cooperation, they have a strand with the European neighbourhood policy, and we also have a strand with the member states on the structural funds, which is probably the highest amount, and then between the countries themselves. Here you see it. It's a particular strand for Turkey on the Black Sea. This for the season. Okay, what we have to do next? Suppose you have a great idea with young people to create a problem. What are we going to do? Well, there's a whole bunch of text you need to go through, which is very interesting, but I think I'm getting close to time. So I'll go very quickly, and I will say what the most important thing is, which comes to this. We want to focus on sectors. We can't do everything. So we focus on particular sectors which we put down in the programs. And the most important thing, that is, if we do this, we do it with these counterparts in order to draft, let's see, the whole coordination now. Community is beautiful. In order to draft strategies, I'll leave this for later. Every country has to prepare a country strategy paper, which should be based on the national strategy, their economic strategy, economic development strategy, the political strategy. These country strategy papers form the basis for IPA support. Basically, if it's not mentioned in the strategy paper, we will not provide support for it. So at this stage, a lot of interest groups, players, told their governments, this has to be in your country's study paper, because this is essential. We get also information via, so we also monitor that these elements are indeed in. Oh, tell me, oh, okay, I can go on forever now. Oh, I don't have time to discuss, to share my views, it's not more important. So in that context, your steps are to make sure something is there that you can book on it. So if you do a project on youth, if you do a project training employment, startups, by social innovation, social entrepreneurship, all these kinds of approaches, make sure there is something there in the country strategy paper. That's it. Then it can be proposed a specific project to the national IPA coordinator. This national IPA coordinator has an obligation, and civil society will make sure that they live up to involve all relevant stakeholders. So if they just write down something they thought about, this would be cool to do, and then submit it, we should ask, and what is the civil society's involvement here, and the business representative organizations, and the education institutes, and research institutes, how do they look upon this? Does it fit in there? And if you do so, and no feedback from them, no elements taken into account, we are in a position to reject it. And say we're not going to support the project. Again, I hope that within my Directorate General, people will start thinking more in brains than in bricks. Because for me, that's the most important building blocks for an economy. Once it's there, we get into the phase that we put it in a national program. These national programs are made public. So even if you haven't had a chance to influence it, you can read what they plan to do and take benefit of that, and point out where there is a missing link. And then say for next year's programming, please take this into account, because otherwise you miss this. We started paying more and more attention to the implementation. We've had IPA 1, very much focused on policy reform and all that as well, adopting the legislation, but we noted that the implementation was weak. Now we're going to focus on implementation and supporting the monitoring of the implementation. So if a government comes with a great plan to make sure that there's no more segregated schooling, we're going to watch out whether it really is happening. And they can make the great plans and put papers in it, but if it changes, because in the field they're not applying it, either directly or indirectly, then it's a problem. Give an example. We do a project on the history of the Western Balkans. Just been up for calls and proposals now as well. Because the problem is that everywhere in these countries, the history is looked a bit differently. And I'm not saying that we are masters of the truth, but I say together you could come to a common view on your history. And that we do with the history teachers and with the ministries. But if we make a nice booklet, a nice teaching material, but in the schools it's not implemented, and we go on with the same thing, you can imagine our reaction. So we have to make sure that they also, it's good to do. If we have the religious leaders coming together in Sarajevo and in Brussels saying how important it is that we finally start living together again, and then all these, and then at local level, they still have the nationalistic speech, even by the clergymen, and there is something wrong. So top-down won't work if it's not accompanied with a bottom-up approach. So therefore we have to strengthen, again, the civil society, the actors on the ground, so that they are aware. So looking at the material just received, I think the others know about it as well, you struck on something which we try to work on constantly. And I just see that there is a few people who need an help. And it's an example that I should normally now address to them in their language directly. Perché così faccio sapere che rispetto alle minoranze linguistica nel mio discorso. Che è normale, perché questo è la vera democrazia, in quale la maggioranza si è dato alla minoranza e fa finire parte della discussione. And I use the language now as a very simple gimmick example, but it is something which I think we should do with minorities. If they have it, embrace it. Try to speak their language, their culture, get into their skin and see it from their point of view. Because you have to make sure that these people feel part. So if we talk about vulnerable groups like youngsters, well, we don't talk their lingo, we don't follow their rap, and we don't are in their situation and don't feel the pain they have, we cannot make policies for them. You can't make policy from Brussels. We are an ivory tower of glass, and we cannot. It has to come from the field. But if these channels from the field up to the NIPAC, the National IPA Coordinator, and then to us are somewhere blocked, then we have a problem which may serve our needs in short term, of the NIPACs, the governments, but in the long term, it will make sure that the pipe at the end where the push comes will explode. And we've seen what can happen in Turkey. We've seen what happens in Bosnia. And I'm basically pleased it happens, because it shows to the politicians, if you block this pipeline, it will burst at a level which you don't want. So I hope that other politicians with that will actually make the effort and do the extra mile and finding out what needs to be done in the field. Therefore, events like this, not only they provide me as a sort of therapy to talk about these things, it also provides me with the ability to learn from you about what we do wrong, where we can improve it, and how we can do it. I'm very pleased to see that social media is being used by you. I use it with the civil society because it's a channel, it's a way to bypass, to have an additional channel to get this information about what we need to do. So, tell me, help me to make up my mind. Thank you.